Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and today I've got my monthly reading recap, an interview with the authors of The Return of the Jedi Visual Archive. I document my time spent at the Acolyte premiere in Hollywood, and we hear directly from showrunner herself, Leslye Headland. What is going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. And I don't know about you guys, but maybe it's just this time of year, or maybe just the season of life that I'm in, or just this season I'm in. I'm recording this episode in the month of May, and guys, I am tired. I don't know. Maybe it's just because we're like not quite halfway through the year or what is going on, but my full-time gig has been extra stressful lately. Home life has just been, nonstop, as you parents out there know. And maybe just because, we're so close to summer break for the kids, things just feel intense and things just feel full on. All that being said, I am happy to be here today on the mic, chatting with you about the books that I've read the past month, what I'm planning on reading this month. I'm going to be sitting down with some Star Wars authors to talk about their recent addition to a reference book that just hit the shelves recently. And most importantly, guys, I got to attend the Acolyte premiere in Los Angeles recently. So I've got a ton of great stuff prepped for today's episode. So I'm really excited to dive in. And what better way to do that but with my last current next. So the last books I read were Blood and Fury by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland, The Desert Prince, which is the #1 book in the Nightfall saga by Peter V. Brett, Tales of Enlightenment by George Mann, and The Academy, The Climate Diaries #1 by Aaron Arsenault. And like I said on my previous episode, I'm treating my last current next kind of just as like a catch-up recap of all the books that I've read since my last episode. So if you're tracking me and helping me stay accountable, I think most of these were supposed to be what I was reading next in my last episode. So don't check too closely though, guys, please don't. So The Climate Diaries was a book that the authors and publishers approached me to read, and it's all about a young kid who is really smart, and he's tapped by the government to help join this elite crew of young kids who are trying to fight climate change and just fight for the betterment of the planet. And this book was pretty fun. It's a young reader's book. Nothing crazy, nothing too deep. I did find the lead character kind of troublesome in some of his personality quirks. And particularly for younger age readers, I know people like my son would probably kind of get excited by a kid who's, kind of a bad kid and getting away with lots of stuff. But towards the end, he has a little bit of redemption, and it kind of teases another story in the saga. I also read Tales of Enlightenment by George Mann, which is the collection of short stories that were published in Star Wars Insider last year, I believe, if I'm getting my time right and my calendaring right. These are George's contributions to Phase 2, and these were published, like I said, in issues of Star Wars Insider magazine, and I actually hadn't read these. I wasn't keeping up with the short stories, so I was excited to read them all at once, and I'm glad I did that because I really feel like there's a benefit in kind of reading these sequentially, and the cool thing was that a lot of them did kind of pop into storylines from the High Republic comic from Marvel during Phase 2 and from a number of the storylines going on, most particularly the Battle of Jeddah. So that was really cool, and I want to give a shout out to Titan Books for sending me a copy of that for me to check out. Thanks a lot. Also, I read The Desert Prince by Peter V. Brett, another book that I was gifted from a publisher, and mainly they wanted me and asked me if I could read its sequel, which is called The Hidden Queen, which is on my to be read for this month, and it was pretty good. It's a kind of expansive fantasy book that I really just wanted to read this one so I could read the second one. It's based off of the Nightfall books, I believe. Don't get me wrong, Nightfall fans out there. But I'm not familiar with this world, and so I have a feeling if I were more familiar with the lore and the other stories that this book is based off of, I might have kind of caught some more intricacies and specificity of the storyline. Having said that, the lead characters were interesting. The storyline was cool. At times the plot kind of felt like it was kind of dragging a little bit, but towards the end, it kind of ramped up, and I enjoyed it, I think, overall, but I'm interested to see where the story goes. And so for fantasy lovers, you could do worse, but it was relatively enjoyable. And then last but not least, I read Blood and Fury by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. It is book 2 in their Chaos and Flame duology. And this book, I recently published my review, and I have to say that I enjoyed the first book more. This book expands on the scope of the story, and I think what I was realizing that I liked most about the first book was that it was a pretty small, tight story about 2 characters finding their way to each other. And I think the scope of this book just got bigger than I enjoyed. I think this story probably would benefit from like a reread from start to finish. And honestly, guys, that was my plan. I was planning on rereading the first book before I jumped into its sequel. And so I think maybe my take on it suffered a little bit for that, but I honestly don't know how much it would have improved my thoughts on it, if I'm being completely honest. It is a YA book, and it didn't have too many tropes to me, or if it did, it wasn't a negative thing. I still really like the main characters, Talon and Darling. I really wish that Caspian, Talon's older brother, was more present. I don't want to give away too much, but basically something happens at the end of the first book which really expands the scope of the storyline in the second book, and it just changed too much, I think, of what I enjoyed about the story in the first place. So not one of my favorites, but thankful that I was able to read it early and give my honest take on that. So I want to give a shout out as well to Penguin Random House for sending me a review copy of that one. For my current book, I am reading at the moment only one book, which is I should be proud of that. I'm giving myself a pat on the back for that. Also probably why I'm tired. I'm only reading one book right now. It is Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton, the next book on the docket for the High Republic, coming out in June, coming out on June 11th, and I am loving it. And keep your eyes peeled on this show, because I'm really hoping to book Tessa for an interview. Guys, this is gonna, I think, go down as one of my favorite High Republic adult novels. I'm about halfway through at the moment, and I don't want to stop reading it. It's one of those books that I just want to keep going. It is excellent so far. Obviously, I'm not going to say a word or spoil anything, but all I will say is that I don't think we're all ready for what is coming. I don't think you're ready for it. I'm excited. I think this is going to go down as one of the best in history for the High Republic, like I said before. So look forward to hopefully my chat with Tessa coming soon, and my full review on that in June. So what I'm planning on reading for the remainder of this month, the next books I'm planning on reading are Extinction by Douglas Preston, which is a thriller novel. I don't know a ton about it. I know there's like a dinosaur or a creature skeleton on the front. It's kind of, I'm getting Jurassic Park vibes. Really excited to read that one. It's got a lot of buzz surrounding it. And like I said, I'm going to be reading The Hidden Queen, which is Nightfall Saga number 2 by Peter V. Brett. My expectations are tempered, and my experience with the first book has me intrigued about this one, but just going to see where things go. And then last but not least, I'm going to read Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty. This has been on my TBR for a while. Head of Zeus, the publisher, sent this to me in a box that they sent my way months ago now, and it looks really intriguing. I've been hearing a lot of buzz about it online, so I'm excited to dive into that one as well. And with that, I'm going to take a quick break, so I'll be right back. This dad has support today from Heroes and Villains. Now, for all my collectors out there, Heroes and Villains offers the most amazing wearable and lifestyle items for people of all genders from all types of fandoms. Heroes and Villains has officially licensed merchandise from Marvel, DC, Dungeons & Dragons, of course Star Wars, and many more. What I love most about Heroes and Villains is that you can be as bold or as subtle in your fandom expression as you want to be. They've got everything from graphic tees, to pattern tops, to jackets, to crossbody bags, to wallets. And yes, my High Republic fam, they've got stuff for us too. And they are constantly adding new stuff to their lineup. So if you need to refresh your summer wardrobe, I've got you. Use code ThisDadReads at heroesvillains.com and save 20% off your first order. And guys, this code is stackable, so you can use this on top of any featured sale or clearance items as well. That's code ThisDadReads at heroesvillains.com for 20% off your first order. Definitely check it out. That's heroesvillains.com using code ThisDadReads. Welcome back to the show. Today, I am excited to be joined by 2/3 of the author team responsible for Star Wars Return of the Jedi, a visual archive published by Insight Editions. Please welcome to the show, Kelly Knox and Clayton Sandell. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, you two.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you. You are actually my first authors of like a reference book that I've ever had on the show. So I've interviewed a number of authors, but never any from this like sector of publishing. So that's really exciting for me, first of all. So congrats on that.
Awesome. We're the first. We're the first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nonfiction.
Yes, exactly. So I would love to have us start this time with just each of you kind of giving us an introduction about who you are, introducing yourselves to the show.
Sure,
Kelly?
I can go first. Yeah. Hi, I'm Kelly. I am, how do I even start? I am a co-author on the Return of the Jedi visual archive. I've written a few other Star Wars books, most recently Star Wars Dad Jokes, which came out around the same time as the visual archive. I'm a contributor to StarWars.com, a few other places, DCComics.com and Crunchyroll. So you can find my writing pretty much all over the internet. I'm pretty easy to find.
One of the most important voices in fandom, if I may add.
Love it.
Thanks, Clayton.
My name's Clayton. I'm a TV correspondent with Scripps News, and as part of that job, I always call Star Wars my side hustle. I've been a fan since a wee 4-year-old age there, and got into writing and doing a lot of stories sort of on the behind the scenes side of things, which I really, really love, as well as the in-universe stuff. But yeah, and then that kind of led to my first writing job for DK for Star Wars Timelines a couple years ago. And this is my second project, this time for Insight. So.
Excellent. Well, I think any number of authors I've had on the show, I feel like the one common factor is that we're all fans first, obviously, right? And so same, like this is my side hustle. This is like my passion thing that I love to do. And this is an audio podcast, but we are all sitting in front of our like Star Wars collections. We were comparing them before we started rolling. So like we're all fans first, right? And so that's what I feel like unites the fans, the authors, the creatives. And that's what I really love about the book community in particular. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
I mean, even like, even our editors, it's so funny. Like even our editors are huge fans too. So it's like, it's fun kind of having the back and forth, because it's not like we're, writing something that they've never heard before. Like a lot of times they know a lot of these things, and it just makes for a great sort of interaction. But up and down the line, it's usually fans that are working on these things, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's a good place to be, I would say, especially in the professional scope, right?
Yeah.
So before we dive into the specifics on the book, on the Return of the Jedi visual archive, I always like to start with my guests to kind of ask, what is your Star Wars origin story? Like, what was the thing that birthed this love for this franchise for each of you? So Kelly, let's start with you.
Sure. So one of my first movie-going memories was actually Return of the Jedi, and a nice little coincidence. I remember I was 6 years old. I saw it in the theater. I remember it because the film strip broke right when the Ewok steals the speeder. And so like everybody in the audience started yelling, and it kind of like cemented that one moment in my mind. I don't know if I ever saw the end of Return of the Jedi that day, but that part I don't remember. But I do. That's my earliest memory of Star Wars. And then, growing up as an 80s kid, we had, VHS tapes of the movies recorded off HBO that we would watch over and over. I would listen to the soundtrack because, in those days you couldn't take your phone or anything with you. So that was the best way I could rewatch, quote unquote, the movies, was to just listen to the music. So it was a very personal experience for me because girls weren't supposed to like Star Wars back then. So I didn't have any like friends that were into it. I didn't really share anything. So even now, it still seems amazing that I can come onto a podcast or, be a part of a team on a book like this, and just share my love of Star Wars without any, not fear, but just, I can just be myself, and it's great.
That's awesome. I'm going to interject really quick. Was it the official soundtrack you had? Because me and my brother, same thing, 80s kids, we would record the tape off of the movie. Like we would play a movie back and hit record on the tape recorder. Because like if we couldn't have the soundtrack.
No, but that is awesome. No, I think one Christmas I got like the actual soundtrack, but I like that even.
That just triggered a memory for me.
Yeah, I bet.
All right. Clayton, how about you?
That's great. Yeah, I was 4 when Star Wars came out, and my aunt and uncle. I remember going to the theater with them to see the movie, and I remember them kind of explaining to me. I was probably a little young to see the movie at 4, but I remember them distinctly describing, sort of before the lights went down, describing who the good guys were, who the bad guys were. Darth Vader, he's in the all black, he's the bad guy, you know. So they kind of prepped me going into it, and then from there it just Star Wars attached itself to my very formative 4-year-old DNA, and just went from there. And I too, the soundtracks were huge for me too. I loved the soundtracks. I had. This is a really weird thing, I know, but I can still remember the smell of the Star Wars storybook that I had when I was a kid. Like it had this glue or this ink smell to it. I can still remember it. It's like this core memory. So so that's kind of how I got started.
That's awesome. I also know that we are all parents here. We were talking about parent stuff a minute ago as we were kind of getting rolling, and obviously, Star Wars has been so formative for all of us of a certain, generation, and it continues to be as time goes on, which is really cool. But I'm just curious to know, I have my own experience with trying to share my love of Star Wars with my kids. Like, how has that gone for you guys? Like, or what does that journey look like as parents, like trying to hand off this thing you love to your kids?
For mine, she always gets a little embarrassed when I admit it, but she is not into Star Wars.
Okay.
That's her mom's thing, so she sees all this on my walls. So to her, it's kind of been separated, but I have tried, a few different things. She actually enjoyed, Solo the most because it was a standalone movie that she could see and just like understand the whole universe, and then she was like, "Oh, okay, I kind of get it now." So that's about as far as we've gotten.
Okay.
She's 15 for reference.
There you go.
My kids are sort of the same. They like it, but they're definitely not into it like I am. But I am surprised that that sometimes my son, who's 10, will be looking at something, or like Salacious Crumb will pop up on screen or on a page or something, and he'll know the names of certain things, certain characters, and he knows most of the stories. But it's kind of like Kelly. It's kind of a dad thing. He used to come in, and I told the stuff on the wall, like he can come in and play with whenever he wants, and he used to do that a little bit. But not just they like it, but definitely not as much as I do.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I would agree. My oldest is 10 as well, and he loves it, and he tries to understand everything. And I took him to see Phantom Menace when it was back in the theaters, and he made some connections, which I was like low-key proud about. But same thing, what I try to do is just nurture their love of whatever they're into, right? Because
Yes.
I quickly learned, like, I can't force them to like the things that I like. Like, that doesn't work, and I'm not even in the teenage years yet, so I can only imagine.
And
So,
for me, my 10-year-old is like way into sports, which I was never into as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he's got his
That's
sports
your thing.
I've got the Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Love it. I think that, just about nurturing their love of whatever they're into, right?
Yeah.
Like that it's so hard, because if it's not your thing, it's like, how do I support you in that anyway? You guys mentioned it a little bit. This is, you've kind of been in the Lucasfilm publishing world for a little bit, but tell me a little bit about like what your journey into kind of writing for, whether it's StarWars.com or books. Like, how did you guys both get into working with this IP?
Well, I started after I left ABC News, and before I started the new job at Scripps. I had reached out to. I had about 6 months where I was sort of had a bunch of free time, so I reached out to friends in the DK publishing department that I had worked with, as on the news side for years, and I just kind of threw, I said, you know me, you kind of know what I do, what my specialties are. Could we maybe just have a conversation about maybe doing some work for you guys at some point? And I expected nothing to come from that, because I had zero experience. I knew the Star Wars world, and I knew the folks at Lucasfilm and all of that, but I had never published or written anything. And a couple weeks went by, and that's right when they needed one more person for the Timelines project at DK. And I was just kind of looking to have a preliminary conversation about what the future might look like, and very quickly they were like, "We need you."
You're hired.
So I jumped aboard, and I think I was the last person. I joined really late on that project, and it was a little like drinking from a Star Wars fire hose because there was so much stuff to, so many stories, books, comics. Stuff that I'd read, stuff that I hadn't read or seen, and even if I had seen them or read them, when you are reading just for fun, at least I'm not this way. I'm not reading it with a critical eye, like, oh, how am I going to break this down and put it into a spreadsheet or whatever. So there was a lot of going back to stuff that I had read before to kind of break down. So that was sort of my first entry into this world, and that project went on for almost a year of researching, revising it, going to Lucasfilm and coming back, and each time a little bit, a few more revisions. But it kind of, I thought, played to my, because a lot of, if you've read timelines, a lot of it is very short, almost like news ticker type entries in there. So I sort of felt like it played to the news person in me, because we generally have to really have an economy when it comes to words and keep things really short. So anyway, that was my first jump into it, and it was super fun.
Wow. My path is actually super different. I started straight out of college as a technical writer, which was horribly boring. I was writing about databases and help files and things like that. I went through a little bit of unemployment then because it was the .com kind of bust. But I ended up at a video game company where I was a tester, which was a great job. And eventually they learned that I could do a little bit of writing. So I moved into community and website stuff there. With that experience, I moved to another company to work on Star Wars Galaxies. So that was my first professional work on Star Wars. I did the website content and community management. And then I eventually left that job to be a mom, stay-at-home mom for a while. So I went freelance. And when my daughter was little, I did try to get her into Star Wars by making Star Wars crafts. She was like 2 or 3. She would wake up at way too early in the morning, and so I would try to get her to make some crafts. I started sharing them online, and they caught the attention of the editor at StarWars.com. At the time, he just happened to see the tweets go around, so he asked me if I'd be interested in doing some for StarWars.com, and I tried to play it cool and wait 30 seconds before replying, but I think you can tell. So I did that for a little while. It was just the crafts for StarWars.com, and then eventually, since I did have experience, I said, by the way, I can help you out with features or whatever else you need. And he was actually kind of surprised because he hadn't realized I had that experience. So that was just after Force Awakens, I think, had come out. And so as the years went by, I kept writing for StarWars.com. Eventually, DK Books got in touch with me for a different project, for a Marvel project, to see if I'd be interested in that. And then from there, they came to me with some other books, like Be More Obi-Wan is another one of my Star Wars books. So yeah, it kind of just progressed from there. So I feel like it's very lucky because they came to me. So
that's great. Well, thank you both. I want to jump into the reason why we're here today, the Return of the Jedi Visual Archive. And I want to just acknowledge that there was another author who participated, obviously, but wasn't able to join us today, S.T. Bend. And just wanted to acknowledge that and say that this was a team effort of someone who's not able to join us today on the show, unfortunately. But I just wanted to start off with, where do you guys even start with something like this? I have the book next to me. This is a massive beast. I can't even imagine. I'm in marketing and production and writing for my full-time gig too. My brain is broken trying to think where do you start with a book like this? So that's what I'm really curious about.
I think I watched the movie about 15 times. I don't know about you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Started with a healthy dose of rewatching.
Yeah, lucky for us, by the time they brought writers on, a lot of the outline and even some of the imagery was already picked for us, so we kind of had the basis already there. But yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because the processes are sometimes different. The editors and the folks behind the scenes kind of may have an outline or an idea, and they may have even, like Kelly said, have picked the imagery. Other times, we'll create an outline and then kind of work together to pick images and do all the layout and stuff like that. But yeah, it helps that the book is more or less chronological. So you're kind of going through the story, and then we sort of break it up by sections. We all have kind of our own sections to focus in on, and it's a lot of it finally puts to work all of my behind the scenes books that have been gathering dust on the shelves, for years. It's like, oh, I get to break all those things out, and the floor just looks. The floor of my office is just like covered in books and Post-it notes, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
As you kind of go through a bunch of the sources and trying to synthesize it all down and pull from all sorts of different places. But it's for me, it's really fun because I get to go back and revisit all these books and like old Cinefex. Cinefex was this great visual effects magazine that went defunct a few years ago, but had the most detailed, fun, behind-the-scenes factoids in it. And so getting to go back into those is really fun. DVD commentaries, you name it. It's a wide range of sources that we get to pull from.
I was just thinking as you were answering that question too, because when I was even trying to describe this book for when I was like, posting about it or talking about it, I found it kind of hard to like categorize and describe this book. So I want to throw it to you guys. Like when someone's asking like, oh, hey, why should I pick up this book? Like, what is this thing? What do you say? And like, what's your kind of elevator pitch for this book?
I think what's really important to differentiate for this is it's not just a behind-the-scenes book for Return of the Jedi. It actually focuses more on the connections that Return of the Jedi made and things that you might not realize even came from something in Jedi. The example I like to use are the Night Sisters that actually it's appeared in a spin-off in one of the Ewok movies, and then the book will trace, that appearance all the way through to like Ahsoka, and we say where the Night Sisters are now. And so I think that's the more of the focus of this book in particular is those kinds of connections, those kind of lines that you can draw throughout the saga, plus all the fun behind the scenes stuff that we got to research and share with the readers.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you start diving into this stuff and you see like the things that originated with Jedi that continue to show up in Star Wars stories today. One of my favorite ones is the folding wing shuttle, right? How cool was that when you see it in the opening shot of Return of the Jedi, and it's like, oh, that's cool. That's how that works. And then it makes it so it can land. All right, that's good. And then you see it, we're seeing it in the Bad Batch. It's still just one of those iconic things that stuck around that was so brilliant in its design and execution that it there was no way you were going to get rid of it 45 years later.
Of course. Yeah, and I can't help but think that, like, if you're a fan, I know there's obviously fans of nonfiction and who love that type of thing, but, like, I'm also a huge documentary person, so I feel like this is, like, a documentary, like, a written documentary, but, like, in an interactive way, and that really makes you, like, be surprised and, like, delighted. Like, I really love the fold-out elements, and it's very, like, it's not just a book. Like, you get to interact and open things and fold things, and that, to me, is another really cool aspect that makes this book super unique.
Yeah, and it's a lot bigger than you would think too. It's like textbook size.
Yes.
Yeah, and we had sort of a little bit of an idea that they were going to put some of those things in there. But when I got it and I opened it up and I saw just how many of these cool fold out things that there are, and the Polaroids from the continuity Polaroids from Endor of the Rebel soldiers. I mean, it's just like really, really neat stuff. And I always get no extra money for more books being sold, but so I have no dog in that fight. But I will say this is a book I would have bought had I not written for it. It would have been something I would have absolutely added to the collection. And I got to mention this.
It's pretty.
Issa Anapada cover art is just.
Thank you for saying that was going to be my next point. Like this wraparound cover. First of all,
you could spend an hour just looking at the details that went into this thing. I'm hoping she can release this as a poster.
Oh my gosh, a print. That'd be amazing. Yeah.
But it's really fun.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a note like this book is like a collector's dream. Like, I have that collector gene. Obviously you can see my shelves behind me. Like, there are certain people who like, they love the tangible thing to have. I think this is really like a definitive thing if you're obviously a Star Wars fan, but a Return of the Jedi fan, and like it's an amazing piece.
It is. It's a love letter to the movie, really. You know, one of my favorite examples is besides the shuttle is Mon Mothma, right? Like, and I want to ask you how many, you know, in that monologue that she gives in that scene aboard the ship there. How many seconds? How long do you think that monologue lasts?
Like under 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's like 38 seconds, right? So, you know, 38 seconds for this character who, you know, was, again, just made such an impression in that short period of time that she continues to show up in projects to this day, which I just think that's a cool legacy.
Definitely. Well, you guys mentioned a little bit kind of like how this book has connections to other things, and that's a piece that kind of surprised me and really made this book so much more than just like a look back on something that happened. And Kelly, you mentioned this a minute ago, but you guys add there's connections to things like The Mandalorian, things that fans are really connecting with today, and maybe pieces of Star Wars that are Star Wars for them. And I know people are gravitating to different eras of Star Wars. Like, obviously we grew up with some of the original trilogy, but there's prequel folks out there. But I think this book does a great job of, like you said, connecting it to other things that fans of all types are enjoying and media that they're enjoying. So I think that's a really cool way to broaden the scope of like who would really enjoy this book.
Yeah, it has a pretty wide appeal. Like, if it's somebody who only knows Baby Yoda, quote unquote, like if that's the area you're only familiar with, like, this is a good way to go back and see, you know, why somebody might get excited to see something on screen that that they hadn't seen before. And then be able to trace it all the way back to Return of the Jedi. I think it's a really unique concept that sets this book apart, like I said, from other behind the scenes. Although there are some great behind the scenes books that I know I pulled from is it John Rinsler? J.R.
Yeah, J.W. Rinsler. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that book is just amazing, and you know, I learned so much just from going through that, and but this just kind of expands the whole universe in a way that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, the J.W. Rinsler book is a great example, because it's nobody could do that book better than he did that book, and so this did, you know, we weren't like trying to rehash the behind the scenes aspects of it. It's sort of this interesting hybrid, really, of you know, talking about story and behind the scenes and the connections, which are super important. And you mentioned The Mandalorian. It's like whenever you watch that scene with the two scout troopers punching baby Grogu there on their speeder bikes, it's like, you know, the direct lineage. You can thank Return of the Jedi for almost everything that was in that scene. You get this just neat connection and appreciation for where it came from. I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah, this is a great book for my son when he's the right age. Like, this is why I freak out at all the things that we watch together. Like, read this book and you'll know, right?
Exactly right.
Yep.
Well, if you both could wrap up your experience with what it was like writing on this book, participating in this book, like, what would you say?
It was definitely a learning experience, not just as a writer to kind of pull all these elements together, but just as a fan. Like, there were so many things I learned about Return of the Jedi. You know, another source I really enjoyed was the old newsletters that they did. I think Bantha Tracks is what it was called. I read so many of those, and those guys, it was all the effects team, the ILM guys, and they had so much transparency about the way they put this film together that I think made me appreciate it, you know, way more as a fan. If you look at, I discovered on Disney Plus, there are deleted scenes. You can see screen tests of women pilots who didn't make it in the final cut, but you can go watch them yourself now. There's so many things to still learn about a movie that you that I, of course, thought I knew everything about because I'd seen it when I was 6 and watched it over and over again. My favorite fact that I learned in this book was that the Emperor's throne, when it turns, is actually Ian McDiarmid's little feet moving it underneath his robe because the motor wasn't working.
That's amazing.
So so I mean, it's always a cliche to say you won't watch the movie the same way again, but I guarantee you will not watch the Emperor in his chair the same way again.
That's awesome.
That's my favorite.
That's a good one. Yeah, it was a ton of fun because this, like I said, just kind of played to my wheelhouse, the behind the scenes kind of aspects of it and the connections aspects, and it was just. There's something surreal about opening up the page and seeing your name with ST and with Kelly because they're huge established voices in this fandom and very it's just kind of an honor to be on a project like that because these are people that have worked on not just Star Wars, but Marvel and Disney and all this kind of stuff. So for me, it was like getting to be a part of this team that is just a team full of rock stars, which is really fun.
That's really cool. Having your name on a Star Wars,
Yeah.
Yes.
So cool.
Pretty cool. It's like a pinch me moment. Yeah.
I know.
Definitely. Well, what do you each also hope that fans take away from this book? Like maybe someone's gifting this book to someone, or what are you hoping that people receive when they interact and engage with this book?
In the same way that I said, you can kind of learn a lot about the guys who made the movies through through Bantha tracks. I hope that comes through in the book as well. Anybody who's seen Light and Magic, the ILM documentary,
yes, I was thinking that.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling that these guys worked miracles, and I think that comes through when you read about how the movie was made, and then how those things that they thought of, one sketch by Joe Johnston in 1982 probably is still being seen in Star Wars, and we're still, amazed by the things that they came up with, and those are still part of stories being told now. So I hope people see how hard those teams worked and how much of an impact they had on movie making. The space battle with the Death Star 2 was one of the most complicated shots done in special effects at the time. So you kind of get the feeling like how much they innovated and how hard they worked. And I hope that comes through in this book.
Yeah, I think totally agree that it's about the people and the creativity that they brought to this film. They're behind the scenes stories, but not that are like overly technical. Like it's not that. But it's sort of celebrating the ingenious ways that they had to come up and create all of these shots, and also just the legacy that the film leaves behind, and how it's just held in this reverent space where creators keep coming back to it for inspiration. And there was something that came out after the book was already in print and we had it in our hands, but in the Bad Batch recently, they had the orbiting space stations, and that is a design that comes straight out of one of Ralph McQuarrie's designs for the Death Star 2, and it's just like that's pretty cool to think that when they're planning out these episodes and they're looking for design ideas, that they're still going back to concept art from Return of the Jedi to inspire them. And to me, that's the biggest tribute of all.
That's awesome. So like a textbook, I'm expecting there's going to be new editions of this coming soon, right? As more stuff keeps coming out.
Can't tell you how excited we are to talk about this project, and I mean that. We really can't talk about it yet, but stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Love it. I hope, as a fan, that there's more books like this from other movies, and I don't know if you can't say anything, but I hope that this is an indication of where things are possibly heading.
I'm just saying, stay tuned.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. As you drink your Anakin Pod Racer, love it. Cup, love it. Okay, before I dive into my question I ask all my guests, as we were talking, I just had as a huge reader myself and engaging with, obviously we have our collections in front of us, but I'm just curious, like, are you guys, how caught up are you, or do you read the other like fiction works that come out from Star Wars, or like what have been some of your favorites from the current canon or recent releases?
Oh, I'm way behind on all the High Republic stuff. So.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
I'm up on the High Republic. Yeah.
Oh, he's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love that era. They've done such a good job of really establishing that time period. Super excited for the Acolyte too.
Yeah.
But yeah, High Republic, and then my personal favorite in the new recent releases is Brotherhood by Mike Chen,
Yes.
which is Anakin and Obi-Wan, and I'm not saying that because he put a character named Noxie Kel in there. Actually, I am saying it because Noxie Kel is in there.
Love it. Another pinch me moment, I'm sure.
Yes, he was so nice. Yeah.
Total coincidence. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
I always tell people, turn to chapter 5.
I would like go to Barnes & Noble and highlight that in all the copies. That are like, that's me.
Once in a while, I'm still like, thank you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to ask you two a question that I ask all my guests, and I discuss this myself every episode. I talk about what my last, current, nexts are. So I want to kick it to you guys. What was the last book that you read? What are you currently reading? And what do you plan on reading next? And just for context, this can be a comic book. It can be a short story, books, or anything, an audiobook. So Kelly, I'm going to kick it to you first.
Sure. I just finished reading the sequel to Legends and Lattes, which is a like a cozy fantasy, very low stakes kind of book. Those are my favorite kinds of fiction books. I think this one's called Bookshops and Bone Dust. It's the sequel to Legends and Lattes, and it was just so cozy. I am currently reading an advanced copy of Temptation of the Force, which is the next. Oh, are you?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I am too.
Yeah, it's good.
It's amazing.
That's the next High Republic book novel coming out. I believe it's I don't think it's YA. I think it's adult novel coming out. And after that, I'm kind of in the middle. I have this huge to be read pile, so I'm trying to think of what's on it. There is a book for DC Comics that I want to read next. So yeah, lots of fun stuff.
Awesome, thank you. I'm reading Temptation of the Force too.
It's good.
It's
so
amazing.
Pretty good, That's
Sorry,
awesome.
Clayton, go for it.
Last fiction book I read was even though he's a big Star Wars guy, not a Star Wars project. Charles Soule's The Endless Vessel, which was fantastic. Really enjoyed that.
Great book.
Currently, I'm reading a nonfiction book. I'm curious about screenwriting, so it's called Save the Cat, which is a fun sort of tips and real world advice on screenwriting. Just because I'm curious about the process, not because I want to write a screenplay, but I'm just sort of curious how it all comes together. And in addition to bugging Kelly for travel tips, the next thing I'm going to be reading probably is a Japan travel guide. Looking forward, hopefully, to Star Wars Celebration, because I've never been and I know nothing about traveling there. So that's next on the list.
How exciting. Are you both planning on attending?
Yes.
Yes. Fingers
Okay.
crossed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
I think we got tickets. I got to
Yes.
double check, but I think we got tickets.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question, because if fans want to engage or interact with you within the coming year, are there any cons or appearances or signings that you guys are going to be attending that people can keep an eye out for?
Gosh, not for me that I know of yet. Other than Celebration in Japan, but it's still early, and sometimes things come together a little late. So we'll definitely tweet about them or post about them. Or
Perfect.
Yeah. I live in Seattle, so I do Emerald City Comic Con every
Okay.
year, but that'll be in the spring. And then, Celebration. Yeah, hope maybe something else, but
Okay, great. Well, that also, again, you guys are just helping me along. I don't have to, my job is easy today. Where can people find and interact with you online and find out and maybe get updates on what you're doing and where you're going to be?
I am still very much on Twitter, too much on Twitter, I guess, at Kelly_Knox. You can find me on there all the time, sometimes tweeting bad jokes. You can find my writing on StarWars.com. I'm easy to find.
You said dad jokes, not bad jokes, right? They're not bad. They're good.
They're kind of both.
I think that's the definition of a dad joke.
There you go. Yeah. I'm still. My best interactions are with the Star Wars community is still on Twitter/X. So I'm still there at Clayton_Sandell, and on Instagram at Clayton Sandell, all one word. So
Perfect.
one of those two places you can track me down.
And you heard it here. They will be at Star Wars Celebration 2025 in Japan. So definitely check that out. I know that that's way too far away for most people who are looking forward to it. But I'm sure we're all counting down the months, right? Well,
Be
Kelly,
here faster than you think.
yes, exactly. Kelly Clayton, thank you so much for joining me today and discussing the Return of the Jedi, the visual archive. I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you again for having us. Yeah.
Take care.
I want to give a huge thanks to Kelly and Clayton one more time for joining me on the show. I had a great time chatting with them. The Return of the Jedi Visual Archive is a gorgeous book. The wraparound cover alone deserves to be on your bookshelf, on your coffee table. Check it out now. It's available everywhere from Inside Editions. I'm going to take one more quick break, and when I come back, I'll document my time at the Acolyte premiere in LA, and we're going to hear directly from showrunner Leslye Headland. This dad has teamed up with Clever Fox for a giveaway exclusively for my listeners. Clever Fox has tons of product offerings for you journalers, planners, and everyone else in between. If you need a tool to plan your budget, track your passwords, practice self-care, or, like me, use their hourly planner to keep every hour of your day on track, Clever Fox has something for you. With their steady flow of new arrivals and offerings in all sorts of colors and price points, there's a reason they're so loved. Clever Fox wants to give one of my listeners in the US, UK, or Canada a product of their choice for free. All you have to do is head to my Instagram, find the post promoting this episode, give it a like, tag a friend, follow Clever Fox, and you're in. One lucky winner can choose anything they want on Clever Fox's website. Best of luck. And I'm back. I am more than back. I'm back at home because I recently got back from LA, and I want to talk about my time at the Acolyte premiere. I still can't believe that this actually happened, you guys. This was a huge goal of mine ever since the series was announced, and its connections to the High Republic were kind of made clear. I don't know if I really believe in manifestation, but I feel like I somehow manifested this. It was my goal to get there, because I know how much it means to not just me, but to all of the Star Wars book fans out there. And I just made it a goal for myself. It was one of those things where I had it in my mind to make it happen. And somehow, some way it actually did, and I still kind of can't believe it. So thanks to my connections out there and to just tons of emails and inquiries, and I think part of the work that I've been doing over the 3+ years in the book community, writing reviews and doing this podcast, it all worked out. The stars aligned, and I got an invite from Lucasfilm to attend. I was one of the few bookish kind of creator folks who were there. I was happy to see people like Friends of the Force and Tarkin's Top Shelf who were there, and some other first timers, and some new friends and new creators that I got to meet and just spend some time with and freak out with, honestly. And beforehand, I didn't know which authors were going to be in attendance. I actually didn't even know if they were going to be invited, and I didn't feel like I had the space or the person to really ask that question to without being, too nosy. But I was just like, if I got in here, like, the authors have to be there. Like, there's no way they can't be there. And I was so thankful to find out via a hotel room lobby that I knew at least Charles Soule and Claudia Gray were there, because I kind of bumped into them before the red carpet. But thankfully, everyone was there. Mike Siglain had his whole crew. Almost everyone was there, I should say. Everyone minus Justina Ireland, George Mann, and Kevin Scott were there. So I got to meet Tessa Gretton for the first time. I got to meet Zaretta Cordova for the first time, and reconnect with people like Daniel Jose Older, Charles, like I said, Claudia, and meet Lydia Kang and her husband, who were celebrating their 26th wedding anniversary that day. I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate your anniversary by basically Star Wars throwing you a huge party. So to say that this experience was surreal is like a huge understatement, right? Like, I went into it thinking like this is going to be, a fan experience. It's going to kind of feel like Star Wars Celebration, right? Just like connecting with people and like everyone's a friend. And that did happen. Hear me say that definitely did happen. Like, I made some new friends. Shout out also to the guys from Children of the Watch podcast. We kind of like stuck together the whole time because we were just like, what are we doing? But outside of that, the Hollywood of it all is what kind of blew my mind. Like, I walked a red carpet. There was press there. There were stars there. Like, Dave Filoni was there. It was just so much bigger and more. I don't even know if I have the word for you guys. It was just so much grander in scale. Like, the scale of this thing was mind blowing. And, even just after walking the carpet, they had displays up. They had the costume department had a big costume piece set up from May's character. And they had a glass case that had all the lightsabers in it and just tons of photo opportunities and the cosplayers who were there. And that's always such a cool element to me. And just getting to see people expressing their passion for Star Wars and especially for the High Republic in this way, it just made my heart so happy. So I just want to say I took it as a huge responsibility to represent us, to represent you at this event. I can't be more thankful that Lucasfilm, invited me and extended the invite. The show itself, while I can't say that much about it yet, it's amazing. It's probably not what you're expecting in the best way possible. That's all I'll say for right now. I was fortunate enough to also receive the first 4 episodes of them in anticipation of me participating in a virtual roundtable with Leslye Headland, which literally happened the day before the premiere. And thankfully, the release date of this episode is the date that I can actually share that conversation as well. So that was all recorded. I was in a virtual roundtable room with some other creators who you will hear on the call, and I'm going to tag all of them in the show notes. But you might recognize some of their voices from some podcasts and news outlets out there. But that was also a crazy experience. So all in all, the Acolyte premiere will go down as one of my most memorable Star Wars experiences ever. Of course, I hope it's not the last time I get to do something like that, but I am just resting in so much thankfulness and happiness right now and joy. I cannot wait for the Acolyte to be seen everywhere, hopefully to squash some of the haters that are existing out in the online space. It's amazing. It's so good. And I just feel like us Star Wars book people are so seen in this moment, and I just really want us to all soak that in and enjoy it together as a fan community. I'm sure there was a ton more that I'm forgetting at this moment, but definitely go check out my socials. I tried to document as much as I could the experience, and so check out some pictures and just experiences over there. But I also want to take this time to introduce this next segment where Leslye Headland, the showrunner of The Acolyte, answers a number of questions, one by me, about the show, about expectations, and sharing her excitement for what's coming up in The Acolyte. So Casey, why don't you cue that up for me, man?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, we just ask that you please stay on mute until you're called on. We go one question at a time. And on this first round of questions, if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and outlet so Leslye knows she's speaking to. And we will start with Keith and Kerwin, please.
Hi. So my question for you is, how did your work on previous shows such as Russian Doll influence your vision and direction for The Acolyte?
How did my work on other shows shape the vision? I mean, certainly Russian Doll, I'd say. That was an intricate story, obviously, with the Groundhog Day element, having to keep track of this storyline that sort of spiraled down into the heart of what the story was about. And I hope we've achieved sort of the Star Wars version of that with this storyline, with the Rashomon elements and seeing things from 2 different sides. This is a point of view of one character. This is the other point of view from another character. So that's I would say that prepared me really well for the story we ended up telling here.
Thank you.
Trisha, go ahead.
Hi, Trisha Barr for Fangirls Going Rogue podcast. You, in The Acolyte, you're using one of my favorite archetypes, the witch. A lot of current storytelling is challenging patriarchal tropes about witches. What do you want to bring to the cultural perspective of witches?
What do I want to bring to the cultural what of witches? Sorry.
The cultural perspective of witches.
Oh, perspective. Well, I think that they, of course they're witches, and that's an element that George and Dave created with the Clone Wars. But I do think that my version of it is more about a collective that utilizes the Force differently than the Jedi do and would rather be left alone so that they can develop their own way of manipulating it, use it, whether it's for good or bad is kind of left up to the audience's interpretation of them. So I guess that's how I would be challenging the perspective.
George, go ahead.
Hi, this is George and Josh Bate with the Hollow Files. Leslye, thank you so much. Really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
It seems that one of the great tenets of working at Lucasfilm is collaboration with so many different departments, individuals, things like that. As you worked on The Acolyte, did you consult with other filmmakers who had directed and written other Star Wars stories? I know Rian Johnson had directed one of your first scripts and then obviously did The Last Jedi. I'm not sure if you consulted with him or other Star Wars writers, directors in crafting The Acolyte.
Well, it's interesting. I worked so closely with my designers, and all of them were very well versed in either their fandom for Star Wars or their understanding of it aesthetically. And also, they were very familiar with the aesthetic of the High Republic as well. So we did a lot of trial and error. We did a lot of collaboration. We did an enormous amount of presentations to each other so that all the departments were on the same page. So I do think that that really was the key to making a show like this one. You can't do it on your own. It's got to be between you and your team.
James, go ahead.
Hi, James Burns from Jedi News here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. So my question for you is, there's a lot of people out there that have never ever read anything from the High Republic because they just, tune into the films and watch content on Disney Plus. So how would you pitch The Acolyte to them?
Oh, I would say pitching The Acolyte to people who are unfamiliar with the High Republic, I would say this is a fresh entry point. It could definitely elevate the show if you've had the experience of immersing yourself in that in beautiful world. But you certainly don't need to have read anything or know any references to it because we are taking place a bit closer to the prequels than the High Republic. So hopefully we have enough referencing of the High Republic, but we're not leaning on it narratively to support our story. I would like to think that our story stands on its own.
Gustavo?
Hi, Leslye. I'm Gustavo from Trial of the Force. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. My question also has to do with the High Republic. But before getting into the High Republic, Star Wars has, I think, been known a little bit for being slower to embrace diversity in it, not just its casting, but also in the stories it tells about diversity. Through the High Republic and that publishing effort, we have seen a lot of diversity with the characters that are finally introduced, be it with their races or their sexualities, but also the stories that we tell about them. With the Acolyte, how do you embrace that ethos that the High Republic publishing effort has done to not just bring in diverse characters, but also to tell diverse stories?
Well, I hope that if you're a Star Wars fan, my hope is that you will notice the different elements of Star Wars that we have brought, other Star Wars media that we have brought into the Acolyte. We're referencing the High Republic with the design of the robes, with including the character of Renester Grow. I think that we're definitely referencing Clone Wars when we explore the witches and the coven that Jodie Turner-Smith leads. So there's that. I think a lot of the fact that we're using practical elements, we're using real sets, that really, I think, lends itself to the original trilogy. And then where the Jedi are in their trajectory is very close to what ends up happening to them in The Phantom Menace. So hopefully we're merging a lot of those storylines to feel more diverse and hopefully exciting because of that.
Jason?
Hi, Leslye. Jason of This Dad Reads here. This is a big moment, like we've been saying, for the Star Wars book community.
I just want to know, what message do you have for the High Republic book fans out there in anticipation of the release of The Acolyte?
Oh, I want to say I love you. Thank you for investing in a world and an era that I think is so new. And I definitely had that experience working on Acolyte. You're diving into something that isn't referencing the live action canon or the Skywalker saga. So you're willing to dive in at a particular entry point and enjoy the stories of the Jedi and what George created in a different context. So I would hope that you have a similar experiencing, a similar experience watching The Acolyte. Sorry. My mouth is really dry. Okay.
William, to you.
Thanks for chatting with us. William Devereaux from the Ion Canon podcast. George Lucas loved symmetry and parallels in Star Wars. In many ways, The Acolyte feels like a reflection of the Phantom Menace, kind of as you alluded to earlier, from the use of the Force to create life, to the Jedi testing process, eventually admitting an older child to be trained as a Jedi. And of course, twins are a Star Wars staple. I'm assuming this was intentional. And if so, how did you balance drawing the parallels to the Phantom Menace and other films without making it feel too similar?
It was difficult, for sure. You want to hit all the particular tropes that make something feel Star Wars. Like I said, those practical sets, the familial clashing, the struggle between master apprentice, father daughter, sister sister, all of those things I think are elements of George's stories. Ahsoka and Anakin, Luke and Anakin, Obi-Wan and Anakin. I was hoping to embody that particular, all of those particular tropes and elements. It was daunting. Hopefully we've achieved it in a way that feels both fresh, but also very reverent to what George has created.
Charlotte and Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi, Leslye. It's Charlotte and Caitlin from Sky Talkers. So great to talk with you today. You recently said in an interview that the episode The Wrong Jedi from the Clone Wars was a favorite and provided some inspiration to the Acolyte. What was it about that episode that stayed with you and maybe found its way into the Acolyte?
Well, there are two elements of that episode that I think show up in the Acolyte. First of all, the wrongful accusation of a character that they've committed a crime, a really horrible crime that they didn't do. So there's definitely that element. It's one of the things that starts the story off. And then the other thing that I love about that episode is Ahsoka's choice to leave the Order, which is something I hadn't really tuned into as like an option that someone could do. So those were the two things from that episode that I was extremely inspired by.
Mark, go ahead.
Hello, Leslye. You work closely with Neil Scanlon and the Critch Cantina team at Pinewood to create all kinds of really, really cool stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Oh, absolutely. Neil embraced me immediately, which I was so grateful for. He was very supportive of my ideas and my requests. He does so much. When you get to work with him, whether it was the mask with that element of horror with the smile. That was something that we worked on for a really long time in terms of how to construct it. The character of Basil was someone that I said, I want to do this with a guy in a suit like the old days. I don't want this to be a CGI character. What do you think? How can we execute it? And he worked so hard for months on creating the design of that character, making that character work. The droid Pip was so much fun to work with. Amandla would joke that it was like a little Mercedes-Benz in her pocket because every time she was done with a take, they would come and take it from her because it was so it was remote controlled by a puppeteer who was excellent and actually worked with Amandla in rehearsals so that the character felt very much like, so that the droid felt very much like a character. So yeah, Neil was instrumental in all of that.
Dan?
Hi there, Dan's there from Coffee with Kenobi. Looking forward to seeing what everyone thinks about the Acolyte, as I'm sure you are. And now this question, I don't want to spoil anything, so bear with me. What can you share about May's mission to kill Jedi without the use of a lightsaber? Because it is a unique fighting choice. What inspired that decision creatively?
The choice for May to attack Jedi without a weapon was to put a new spin on how you would attack a Jedi. Meaning this is a time period where not a lot of people are running around with a lightsaber unless you're a Jedi. And so therefore attacking a Jedi without a weapon would be a daunting task and something that would hopefully intrigue the audience.
Sarah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Sarah with Skywalking Through Neverland. And you talked about all the inspirations of Star Wars that you're trying to involve in this show. Well, music is a huge thing that connects Star Wars. And I just wondered, is there a specific point in the narrative that you directed the composer, Michael Abels, to use any particular Star Wars themes or sounds or instrumentation to further that connection?
I didn't really start out giving any direction to Michael. He's brilliant. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning musician. He obviously worked on Jordan Peele's films, which is how I just, was introduced to him. There was an element in the show that I felt needed to feel like John Williams, but also had to have an eerier, darker edge to it to tie into the tone of the show. Initially, I didn't really give him a lot of direction. It was more once we got into specific cues that I would say I would give certain direction. Like, this just doesn't feel, very Star Warsy to me. Or he would say, I think this is a really huge moment because a lightsaber is being pulled out. And I would say, yeah, but it's the bad guy pulling out a lightsaber. So, and we would kind of have those really spirited conversations about how to execute, or how to support choices that were elements of Star Wars that we've seen before, but be specifically in his perspective and voice and point of view as a composer.
That's all the time we have. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.
I want to give a huge thanks once again to everyone at Lucasfilm for making this experience so memorable. The way that they're recognizing all of the bookish folks of this fandom just makes me so happy. And like I said before, The Acolyte is truly something special that I cannot wait for everyone to experience. June 4th is quickly approaching, and I'll have much more to say about the show as the series progresses. So until next time, my friends, take us out, KC78. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.